and he currently works for United Recovery and Remarketing. And he does have a good opportunity that may come his way. He may talk about that. Today's talk is called Sharpening the Axe, and it goes into strategic coding before you hit commit with your project. And he'll go into best practices for code quality and thinking or thoughtful code and talk about how thoughtful code leads to better results. And I think that was done by a president who talked about sharpening his axe before chopping down the cherry tree. And you can go into that story, Matthew. So Matthew, welcome and take it away.
Hey, thanks for having me. First off, thanks for everybody that showed up for this. I know a lot of you are either learning to code or have been coding, or some of you may be considering, but either way, excellent career, excellent industry to work in. So I picked this topic because after I got out of the tech academy and started working on my first professional job, I had to convince myself to do one thing, and it was really difficult: slow down. I think when we first get into the field or first get into the industry, there's this strong urge. I need to push code. I need to get it merged. I need to make sure that I'm getting things into production because I want to prove myself. Well, Abraham Lincoln had a very famous quote that says, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first four sharpening my axe." So my entire strategy around development now and being an engineer as opposed to just a code jockey has more or less revolved around this quote. If you think about it, it's foundationally saying that you need to consider all of the important aspects first and then dive into the actual work. So that way you work smarter and not harder. Hit it with a rusty axe, you're going to break it. Just like with code, if you put in bad, malformed, not thoughtful code, it can be difficult to maintain. You're going to encounter a whole lot of problems down the road. So, as such, I thought this was one of the more insightful things I could bring you guys without actually having to talk about a whole bunch of code. You guys are deep in the middle of code, but for those of you who aren't working professionally yet, when you do, you're going to find that that's just the tool that's required. It's just the gateway. That's the beginning. Like what this does is gets you enough to get into the door and start doing the actual job, which is thinking about all the hard questions and figuring out how you want to make these plans. So I'm really hoping that today my talk can help you make these plans a little more effectively and a little easier. Keep in mind, most of your stress is always going to come from the unknown. But at the Tech Academy, you've been learning how to make sure that you don't get stressed out by the unknown. You learn how to learn. You learn how to figure out what it is that you don't know so that you can evaluate it and attack it. So, in the same way, we're going to attack this side as well. So, today, my goal, hopefully, is to give you guys a mindset that changes you from being code jockeys to actually being engineers. The difference is that somebody can push code and you can write a number of solutions to fix many different problems. But the question is it the right one? Is it effective? Does it fit the architecture? Is it going to be maintainable? Can you scale it up if the assignment gets bigger? There's all kinds of ways. And sometimes you could even run the risk of writing something that scales too big for what it's actually for. So, the first step that we're going to start with is going to be understanding the problem. I'm a big guy on quotes. Quotes are something that I pretty much keep around me all the time. I've got my desk like facing this way, but on my wall behind me, it's nothing but different paneled quotes. So one of them that I love for this one is Albert Einstein. He said, "It's not that I'm so smart; it's just that I stay with the problems for longer." A lot of people have this misconception that taking a story and tasking it out and slamming the code through immediately is the best way to go. And that's what I did in the beginning too. And my senior was all too happy to write tons of comments, reject my pull requests, ask me some pretty blunt questions. So, what we should do in the very beginning is take the story in and analyze the context of the story. I'm not even talking about the story itself yet. So, think about it. Let's say that you're asked to write an image display container for a banner head on the website. Okay, that's pretty easy, right? You could just put together the component, have the spot ready for the image to go into, ask your graphics team for the image, slap it in, and push it up, right? But if you're not thinking about what the website is supposed to do as a whole, who you're marketing to, what you're going for, you're probably missing out on some different efficiencies, right? What if the image is supposed to change dynamically? What if the image is supposed to pull each week? What if there's a CMS tied to that image? There's all kinds of things that you need to consider in order to make sure that that evaluation is properly done. This will save you so much trouble with this first step. So I promise you, if you will write this down, make sure that with every story, you pay attention to the big context. I'll give you a real life example. So I was asked to help migrate an old API script for one of our clients. That client, their API request was pretty simple. We need a report to come from your database, and that report will simply display the following parameters, right? Pretty simple stuff, nothing major. It automates through an email, but it's a pretty big, detailed, heavy report. When it runs, it took like 12 minutes to run every day, right? So I start looking at this and I analyze the API usage. And then I have a look at the email readbacks. We can track how many times that email was opened because we integrate with HubSpot, things like that. Any guesses on how often that email was opened in the past year? The client wasn't even using it anymore, but because we were migrating to a different database, we thought, hey, this is tech debt. We need to bring it in. So we're going to spend probably 40 hours of effort getting this rewritten for the new system, for the new database. We're going to bring in all this data and we're going to make sure that it absolutely supports this client's need, a need that the client wasn't using. And honestly, the people that were there didn't even remember that that report was coming in. Most of them had filtered it into a different folder. So I brought this to the attention of my team and I said, hey, I'm not sure we need to do this anymore. And it saved 40 hours of developer effort. To some people, that may not seem like a lot, but that's a very costly investment. Every time you're writing code, every time you're working on a story or on a task, that is an investment from the company. Every project has to be considered in cost. That's going to happen every single time. So if you're, writing something and you're not thinking about the context, it's definitely going to come back and bite you later. So make sure that you understand the problem itself and what the evaluation on it could be. There's a joke that I like to tell when I talk to juniors about this as well. Uh, there's a developer who builds a bar. He builds a table. He builds stools. He builds a shelf. He builds all the liquor. He builds a roof, a floor, walls, a bartender, a register. He builds planks. He builds art. He builds decorations. He builds plants. The QA guy walks in and asks where the bathroom is, and everything blows up. Understanding the full context is requisite. You must think about this. So, some other examples that might help hammer this home would probably be, you know, if you're writing a backend API, let's say that you need to go to a third party system and bring some data in. Well, you could go write it as quickly as you can, and you've got solution one on the table. I'm going to get the data, I'm going to copy the data straight from the API into a table. That table is going to have the exact same properties. They're going to be listed the exact same way. You haven't looked at the schema. A schema is just how the properties in a table are arranged, right? So if you don't look at the schema, if you don't understand how the data is going to be used or how it's going to be referenced, has the UI portion already been written for this and it's referencing the properties in a different way? You need to slow down, start with the story, analyze what it is that you're looking for, and then bring it in a way that makes sense. This is going to differentiate engineers from code jockeys. It's also what's going to make you look really impressive when you're doing a take home code test, or it's going to make you look really impressive if you're a junior and you're working under a mid level and trying to become a mid level really quickly. You have to think on a higher scale. Your job is not just to code, your job is to be an engineer, to think about the solution. As such, that leads us into the next point. There's never one solution. It may feel like it. You may get stuck on something for a week and you're sweating it. You're on a 2 week sprint timeline, right? Bullets are coming down. You're going into a stand up every single day. Yeah, I'm stuck. Yeah, I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to talk with our developers today, see what I can figure out. So you talk with mid levels and they give you one good idea. All right. At the very minimum, that should get the juices flowing, right? You want to start analyzing why would the mid level or the senior recommend this to me? Okay. So architecture wise, he wants this here. He wants me to do it this way. These are my steps. The very first thing I do is I pull out a pencil and paper. I don't use my computer, pencil and paper, and I write down the steps on a little flow chart just on my piece of paper. At any point, if I don't understand why something is happening, that's a question that I must ask immediately. One, it reinforces my understanding and my learning so that when I encounter something in the future, I've probably already got that solution under my belt. But two, more importantly, by analyzing it this way, you may ask some questions that lead you to a bigger understanding of the context. You may ask a question that leads you to understanding what a different solution could look like. At that point, you start churning out a couple of different solutions. Let's say you have two. Let's say you have three. You could analyze each of these solutions. It's not good enough to write the first solution. Before you hit commit and create a pull request, you need to have honed the good ideas, not discovered one good idea. You need to have honed the good ones. You're an engineer. Your job is to sharpen the axe, not just deliver an axe. Okay? So the first idea, rarely ever your best idea. Engineers refine, code jockeys rush. Remember that meetings, especially with your team, are for honing your good ideas, not discovering them. So if you go into a meeting, try to go prepared. Have your scratch pad handy, have your questions ready. After you've gone through a few iterations personally yourself, then it's the right time to consider a pull request or to consider committing that code. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Matt, I got to push code eventually, right? I don't want my boss to think I'm not doing any production. I don't want, this product manager who's been breathing down my neck about this to think that I'm not working. Especially if you're remote, there's always this fear of, am I doing enough? Let it go. As you practice these tendencies, this will become rote. It will become habit. It will become a skill that you can say that you have. And when you sit across an interview table from some higher level developers, you're going to appreciate it. I promise you that your senior does not want to spend half of his day reviewing poor code. Okay? So just because you can write code that solves the problem correctly the first time doesn't mean it's the right one. Not every solution is the right solution. So take your time, analyze multiple solutions, slow things down, and then make sure that your solution, when looked at through the lens of the bigger picture that you've taken care of with the story itself, make sure that it fits. So, how do we analyze these solutions? What makes a good solution? I don't know if anybody's familiar with Occam's razor, so don't let me insult anybody's intelligence, but just to go over it real quick, Occam's razor says that the simplest solution is often the best one. And in engineering, nothing could ring more clearly. You can write clever code. A lot of you are getting really good quality education at the Tech Academy, and a lot of you are probably seeking that education elsewhere as well. Probably jumping on Learn.Microsoft. You're jumping on different YouTube tutorials because you're hungry for it, and you should be. Being a developer is all about learning. So, with that said, the simple solution is the best solution needs to be applied to everything you come up with. Like you're here because you're intelligent. You have to use that intelligence and put it in check. If you write a clever solution, I want you to think about this for a second. Real life example. So my current position, we have this uh, this component that needs to be updated on the page, and it's the one spot on a page it'll ever be updated. But in order to write it, we tried out a new pattern. This new pattern takes whatever needs to be created and breaks it into pieces. And each of those pieces goes off to a different delegate. And those delegates call mediators, and those mediators can form and shape how the requests and the responses look. This is a pattern you see in huge scale architecture. It's nothing uncommon and it's not wrong by any means. I don't want to give off the impression that that solution is incorrect. But now, in order to wire up one event to update that one component, takes about 3 hours of effort because you've got to update 6 files to make it work. Brilliant code. It's foolproof. It'll probably never break. Well, I say that, but give it a year. It'll probably break somewhere. That said, the goal is that it might not break, and it's scalable enough that you could probably hammer as many events through that thing as you wanted to, and it will run like a well-oiled engine. But it's used in one spot, just one. And the events that get wired into it, it could just as easily be called. It's not a heavy table. There's not a lot going on. So Occam's razor, when applied to this, would probably say, hey, cool idea, maybe not for this. there are other spaces in our application that could absolutely use that level of engineering, and we're probably going to apply it. So, in some ways, that developer created a really cool solution and it almost acts as a proof of concept. So we know that we can use it for bigger things. We know that it's scalable and we know that it works and it's maintainable. So now we'll use it there. So I'm not trying to be doombringer about it. Basically, the concept is that if you do something that's over engineered, okay, fine, cool. Make sure that it has bearing and meaning. There's a quote here as well, because I do love my quotes from Leonardo da Vinci. He says that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. If you can write something simply, think about what happens afterwards. The people who have to review your code before approving it, they don't have a whole lot of questions. It's simple. People who have to go behind you and maintain your code when you've moved on to your better job because you're an engineer and not a code jockey will not have any questions about what's going on. Maybe you've got good comments, or maybe your code truly is simple. This is an elegant, simple way to do the job, right? So I want to leave everybody with one, slow down, two, analyze, and three, I encourage simplicity. Keep it simple. You do not have to write super clever code. If any of you are out there grinding leak code, one, I'm sorry for you. Please don't do that too much. But two, keep in mind that leak code, even that is designed to encourage simplicity. A lot of people approach these heavy coding problems with these huge algorithms with, I've got to write some, 200 line long file to help handle this, when really leak code is trying to make you think in terms of optimization, in terms of efficiency. How can I take this 20-step solution and turn it into three? And sometimes you're going to kick yourself in the shin when you figure out how to do it because you're realizing, oh, that means I need to refactor at least a few things, right? And you're going to go, oh. So you'll message your project manager, you'll message your tech lead, you'll message your seniors and say, hey, I found this. I think this might be the way to go. It's going to require a couple things to be refactored. I'd like to put the task up for consideration or the story up for consideration and the cost. Please look at it. Please evaluate it. And 9 times out of 10, your senior is going to go, yeah, good catch. Please do it. That's what's going to happen, right? Make sure that you keep it simple. Saying keep it simple is one thing. Actually having to make it simple can be really challenging, but can also be really, really impressive. Tell me this. You've got two candidates that come in for a job interview with you. One of those candidates puts in front of you a 120 line script that takes the information that you want and it does what you need. But it's 120 lines. Takes a long time to review, takes a long time to look through. The other candidate does it in 40. And you look at it and maybe you're lost. Maybe it's too clever. Maybe the way that he wrote it, it isn't readable. You have to really dig into syntax and some of it's just tough. So I'm not talking about simplicity in terms of lines. I'm talking about simplicity in terms of how does this execute? How is this moving data from one point to the other? Is it safe? Is it secure? Am I making sure that there are steps that I've put into place to prevent things from being broken? So the more complex your solution is, the higher the chances that it's going to be misunderstood later. Make sure your code is readable. Make sure you use smart comments. I don't mean comments like, oh, this stores a variable. We don't need that. What we need comments on is, hey, sometimes we can receive data from this API that's malformatted. So we're going to double check that and we're going to make sure that it's not malformatted. It needs to follow this point. Then put your line of code there that says, hey, check this input, make sure that's right. And if so, let's move on, right? So you're thinking about that, which leads into our next point. So before you hit commit, you've gone slow. You've analyzed your solution and kind of looked at, you know, is this the right solution? Am I headed the right direction? You've made sure that it's simplistic and you've written your code. So it's time to hit commit. Almost. We're getting there. The next thing that you need to do is called functional testing. Yeah, you can write unit tests, and unit tests are important. I would say that they're a valuable part of everybody's code, but you're going to work in some companies that don't do unit tests. My company does not do unit tests. We should, we want to, but I don't think any of us have the time. We're a very small dev team, And the company is not a software company, does other things. We just have an in-house software team. And so that puts a lot of the burden on us to write literally everything. Like we do front end, we do back end, we do DevOps, we do API and integrations, we do all kinds of stuff. So there's no siloing in terms of where we go. So should we write unit tests? Oh, absolutely. Do we make the time for it? Not always. So that leaves it on us to make sure that functionally we are testing the life out of this thing, right? Uh, the bar joke that I told earlier, you need to go through every possibility and consider it. So with that, testing shouldn't be an afterthought. A solution that works in theory but fails in practice is not a solution. You can say, hey, I wrote this thing and it takes in API information, on a sunny day scenario. The moment the API sends back something that doesn't make sense and your whole system blows up and then you've got product downtime is a big problem, right? You need to think about every way that you could break it and make sure that your code addresses it. You would think, well, some of this is built in and some of it is. There are error boundaries. There's all kinds of ways that you can write those to make sure that the user is gracefully handed a proper execution. If you use Azure, for example, we use Azure monitoring and logs so we can throw errors and tell the system to keep going. But we have to write what that error is and we have to throw it. We have to make sure that we tell the system how to gracefully handle that. So keep in mind, your code is not complete until you functionally test it, especially when it comes to inputs that revolve around data. So if you're working in, let's say it's MVC, and you're working in the model layer and you're dealing with information coming in and out from your controller, you need to be very careful that what you're looking at doesn't just involve input and output of like how the data is. You need to be thinking about business rules, transformation logic. Like, how is it that you're evaluating how this code is going to work if you haven't started at step one and looked at the whole picture? But then two, you have to really think about what could go wrong. And then as you chew on that, jot it down. Everything that could go wrong, you need to try and break it. So you can write unit tests to do it. You can, like XUnit, for example, is used in C sharp. So you can say, hey, I want to assert that if I put in this information, it's going to do this. I'm expecting an error to be thrown. This is the error code that I want to see. Boom, run that test. And you don't get the error code that you want. Something else happens, something higher up the stack. So look at your call stacks, read your call stacks. I like to start from the bottom of mine and then work my way up because as I see that, I can understand more and more about how the hierarchy got. So that may be something that some of you are familiar with, but if you're not, I encourage you look into call stacks, learn how to read a call stack. It will be your best friend. Yes, you can take a call stack and you can pop it into Chat GPT, but please understand that GPT does not have knowledge of your entire project or multiple projects or your entire repository or your solution. That is your job. So use your tools where you can. GPT is a great tool. It's perfectly fine. But get used to reading call stacks on your own and understand how and why something failed and be able to pinpoint where it happened. There's a common meme out there on the internet. I kind of wish I'd brought it now, but it says, if you're writing JavaScript and debugging it because something went wrong, it's like error on line 63. So you go to line 63 and it's blank. It's going to happen sometimes, but if you can read your call stack, I promise you'll find out why it's blank. So make sure that you functionally test all of your code before you hit commit. So now we've thought about it. We're slow. We're deliberate. Making sure that we've got the simple solution. We've checked out multiple solutions. Now we need to make sure that when we code our solution, it follows the existing architecture, unless you have a very good reason not to. Some of you are going to go in eager to prove yourselves, and that's great, and you should. The one thing you don't want to, the two things you don't want to do is one, reinvent the wheel. There is no need to write something that's already been written because you think your solution is more clever. Because I promise you, it's going to one, confuse people, two, going to create some confusion down the road when they're like, oh, well, this function does this. No, this function does this. Well, they both do the same thing. This one does it different. Oh, no. Somebody's going to right click that section, go to get blame, and slap you in the back of the head for it, right? You don't want to do that. The second thing you don't want to do is buck the existing architecture. When architecture is in place, let's say that you have a senior that went in and more or less single-handedly built a project because they're going to do that. They're going to make it look easy, and you're going to be a little jealous of it, right? One day you're going to be the guy doing that. You do not want to be the one that says, "Hey, he's using services, he's using managers, he's using functions, and then he's got a repository." You do not want to be the one that starts adding new folders and changing how that data is moving just because that's the one you're familiar with. I don't want to use service and manager. I'm going to go with an MVC model. Don't do it. Make sure that your solution fits that. Misaligned or innovative solutions that go against established architectures, they don't fit. And when they don't fit and somebody comes in behind you to maintain it and it doesn't follow the pattern, they're not going to find it. And then they're going to rewrite what you wrote because they couldn't find it. It's a huge issue. So be careful with that. Make sure that you follow the existing architecture and adhere to the standards that your company have set. Um, there's another quote here. I don't actually know where this one came from, but I love it. I heard it. I may be paraphrasing it a bit. So if anybody knows where it came from, I'd love to hear it. But it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Development is a team sport. If you silo and you write it on your own, yeah, you can go fast. And if you're the senior and you're writing that project, go nuts. It's your architecture to pick. Have a great time. But if you want to go far and you want to make sure that your tech makes sense and that your solution is correct, make sure that you go together. Work with your team on the architecture. If you've got a good reason to mess that trend up, contact that person, talk to them about it. Say, hey, I've got this idea. This is what I'm thinking. How do you feel about it? And he's probably going to tell you to refactor the rest of it too. So, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but go with it if you want. So lastly, at that point, should you hit commit? Yeah, probably. You've thought about it, you're careful, you're slow, you're deliberate. So to bring it all home, again, spend your 4 hours sharpening the axe. Spend the other 2 getting ready to cut down the tree with some serious efficiency. You're going to get far fewer comments, far fewer abandoned pull requests, far fewer returning tasks, much less tech debt. I mean, there's no level of good stuff that I can underscore that won't be received. So the last quote that I'll leave you with from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry is perfection is achieved, not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing more to take away. Your solution should be at that point. If you can't take anything else away, if you can't make it simpler, if it's well thought out, at that point, when you push it in, like you've really distinguished yourself. And every single time you do that is going to be another notch in your belt where you put yourself above everybody else. You are engineers, okay? Not code jockeys. So make the best of it. With that said, that's all I've got to say on it. So I'd be happy to open it up for Q&A. And if anybody's got any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, no, that's a great talk, Matthew, and really great insights into what it's like to be an experienced developer now that you've been working in it for a couple of years, and really good insights for anybody becoming a developer and engineer. He really talked about some really good best practices, keeping it simple, which I think is really good advice, and there's some really good tips in there. Now, currently, are you working in the .NET stack?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We use .NET, C#. We're using Blazor server particularly, but we're getting ready to transition it to where we can do the hybrid style where you can say it's either server or this is going to be client rendered. And then we use Blazor for the UI and then SQL for the backend.
Okay. So you would say the what you learned at the academy really helped you with landing. Now, is this your first job since you graduated?
It is. Yep. And I've been in it ever since the Tech Academy, but the Tech Academy definitely prepared me for it. I was actually committing code to this code base before I finished the course. So it was pretty great. Blazor was new to me, but the Tech Academy taught me how to tackle learning something. So I pulled up Blazor's documentation and I found a couple of their kind of learning modules, and I built a side project just like we do in Tech Academy, and I got busy with it. So you just you know how to learn.
No, that's awesome. And I do you do have some great quotes, and I do like the way you think about everything and you reference these quotes. That's a really good mindset you have for what you're doing now. I'm gonna have to make sure I start using my Brilliant app on my phone more.
Yeah,
'Cause
for sure.
I always mean to follow those quotes, and I do for a couple days, and then I get busy doing other things.
I just
Uh,
find that they change how I think about things, and that's really important. So we've got to keep things elastic.
no, I totally agree. So have you heard of Dr. Rob Martin? He wrote a book called Clean Code.
Not yet.
Okay, I recommend you look him up. He's known as Uncle Bob in the industry,
Oh, great.
and yeah, he's an OG, but he talks a lot about what you talk about, keeping it simple, keeping it clean. His book is called Clean Code,
Oh, great.
and it's got some really good insight into being a great developer and being as good as you can be. So
That sounds valuable. Yeah, I'll pick it up soon.
yeah, just to let everyone know, you can leave a question in the chat, and I can pass it on to Matthew if you want to. If you want to have your question, if you just want to ask it aloud, just you can raise your hand just at the bottom there, and I'll unmute your mic for you. Um, Now, Matthew, can you talk a little bit about the steps you took after graduating? So you graduated from the Tech Academy, and then talk about the steps you did to landing your first job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was aggressive before even starting the Tech Academy. I knew that I wanted to be a developer. So what I had been doing was working as a business analyst at the time. I'll say business analyst, but the company had a loose interpretation of that role. We didn't have one before. They kind of formed it around me. But I spent a lot of time in meeting rooms talking to people and figuring out what the solution looked like. And so then I would write it out and I'd hand it to developers. And I got really frustrated when my job at that point was to twiddle my thumbs and tell people, yeah, 2 weeks, another 2 weeks. We might get to it soon. Hang tight. Nope, that's backlog. It just wasn't fun. Like I wanted to build the solution. So my focus was how do I get to bridge this gap to where I can be part of building the solution? Well, I need to learn to code. Okay, so I tried on my own. That didn't work. That's why most of you are here. So I went to my boss. That's something I encourage everybody to try out. Talk to your boss and see if they'll invest in you. My boss invested in me. He paid for the Tech Academy. Said, "Fine, if you can learn how to code, I'll let you be a developer. But you're gonna have to prove yourself first." So while I was in the Tech Academy, I was soaking it up like a sponge. I had access to our code base at the time because my boss had said, "Hey, if you think you can do this, you can access the code base, but obviously we're not going to merge any code until it's right. So we're not going to give you any tasks or anything. You can grab something from the backlog, and if it looks right, then we'll go with it. And we'll see how you do." So that's what I set myself to. I looked for a couple of super low level tickets that I could take care of. I grabbed those and tossed them in my name, and then feverishly hunted down how I would take care of it. Uh, and you'd be surprised. The thing that stumped me most wasn't the code; it was standing up my development environment. So yeah, I guess after that, it was kind of murder she wrote. Like once I finished the Tech Academy, I'd already been writing some pretty. I won't say decent code yet. I probably still don't write decent code, but I was committing code, and I was thinking about it, and I was already growing as a developer before I ever even finished. So I think everybody's journey can be a little different, but just be hungry. Like go for it. Don't let people stop you. Make sure your bosses are aware of what it is you want to do. If it's a company that you can do it at, and if not, your 9 to 5 job becomes finding that job.
No, that's cool stuff. And yeah, being proactive, I highly encourage that. And like Matthew said, be aggressive. And if you put yourself out there, results are going to happen. So definitely good advice with that. And I can understand your code. Like when you first start out coding, and this happens for everyone. If you're coding up a project, a lot of times you're writing code that's like this long, and then you come back and look at it 2 years later, and you can do it, and it's like this long.
Yeah, I've already looked at my code once before, and I'm like, who wrote this? And I realized it was mine. Oops.
That was me 2 years ago when I was just starting.
Yeah.
But That's pretty normal with everyone, I think. And now with continued learning, what do you like to do? I mean, you get the experience on the job, obviously that gives you, really good learning that way. But what other things do you like to do for continued learning, currently?
One big one that I think gets left out a lot. So obviously, people say side projects. Obviously, people say, "Well, I spend an hour a day reading or learning," or I subscribe to different newsletters. These are all things you can do. But one of the things that I really enjoy doing is I take part in Tech 901, which is a local tech group out here where all the developers, engineers, etc., get together and they have different meetups. They invite different people to talk and have those kinds of conversations about, hey, here's how you write better error boundaries. So that way, uh, you don't silo your learning to just one place or to some random article on the internet. You silo your learning instead to things that you might not know about at all. I'm going to go to a meetup on the 18th at the local Microsoft office here that's hosted by Microsoft, and they're talking about how you take MIDI inputs and turn it into code. I don't know anything about that. I don't know that I'll ever use it, but will it come in handy one day? Maybe. Perhaps I'll be sitting across an interview table where it matters. So my continued learning that I enjoy is going to these kinds of public meetups. Not because I'm an extrovert. I hate it. But it helps me get a chance to network, and that's super valuable too. Networking is a huge tool, so I can learn something, I can network, and I can talk to people that actually have some play. And if they have play, typically that means they can get you an interview. And so far, getting your foot in the door is the hardest part.
Good stuff. And you do speak really well. You are very articulate. So you seem a little extroverted anyway.
I've got you fooled.
You're doing it well. You're doing a great job. Doing a great job. So yeah, you should maybe have you ever thought about like starting your own YouTube channel for technology coding, that kind of thing?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Just checking. Just checking.
I may one
Good.
day, but right now I'm still enjoying the learning process. I think it'll always be a thing, but imposter syndrome is strong, and maybe one day I'll come to grips with it. So everybody
Yeah.
else, please know that's a thing. Like you're gonna go into an interview and you're gonna be telling yourself, "I have no business being in this room." You do, you do.
Yeah, it is a really good point. The imposter syndrome, everybody feels that, and it's kind of one of those things that I try to tell students and graduates when they're graduating. You're not a master. Coding takes a long time to master, and you become a senior developer usually after 5 to 10 years, sometimes sooner. But it takes a while to master. So don't come out thinking you're going to have all the knowledge, you're going to have all the tools that you need, and you're going to know everything. It just doesn't work that way. You go through the academy, you learn the fundamentals and what you need to land your first job, and then you go into getting the experience. And after a few years of experience, then I wouldn't say there's ever a time you master it, but you will get to that senior developer, and you'll feel a lot more confident and a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, there's
So
another quote for that as well that I really like by John Acuff. He says, "Be brave enough to suck at something new." It's a big one.
it's a good, yeah, no, that's a good quote. That's a good quote. And it was a Malcolm Gladwell in his book talked about how it takes 10,000 hours to master something.
Yep,
So think 10,000 hours and you're just starting out. So just keep putting the time in, and that will come in time. That will come over time.
I'm looking forward to it. Did
I think
anybody
you did.
else have any questions? Like, where is everybody at? Are you guys Tech Academy students? Does anybody have a prospective job lined up? Like, where are you guys at in this?
You can raise your hand or you can put your question in the chat.
That's right. I'm calling you guys out.
Good job, Matthew. Um, Gab, do you have any questions?
No. Matthew and I actually had a short chat before the start of our meeting, so he shared some resources with me, learning resources which I can definitely use. I'm trying to get a certification for data analytics, and I said that there are lots of data analytics materials in there, so something we can use like to supplement what we learned from the Tech Academy.
No, good stuff. And anyone else? So I do want to ask, and you don't have to go into details, obviously, but you said that you had this possible opportunity coming up for you,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
you can just speak about how those opportunities come and how those are come your way in the position you're in now.
So primarily networking for me, keeping my LinkedIn kind of sharp and up to date. One thing that people miss on their LinkedIn, I think, is actually keeping their resume up to speed. Because you can go into your profile and you can edit what recruiters see in terms of like your latest resume, and it'll actually tell you your resume is from 2021. Like that's probably not a great thing. Go on and get it updated and put the right one back up there, right? So that's netted a couple recruiter conversations. I take recruiter conversations with a grain of salt, maybe a shot of tequila while I'm at it. They do their best because they want to get paid, but they will drop you awfully quickly. So don't put too much stock in recruiters. Have an army of them ready. But the current one kind of fell into my lap because of a networking option. I went to a tech speak about a month or two ago. I had met a recruiter there. Again, still nice to the recruiters. Still like to talk to them. I know what they want, and I want to help them get it because it helps me get a good job too, right? But again, I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket. I know better than that. It took a month for her to contact me and say, "Hey, I remember you from this talk. Got a cool opportunity here that I just want you to consider." She's like, "I know you work from home right now, but this is 4 days in office. Would you consider it?" And I was like, "If the pay is right, sure." She goes, "Well, it's in six figures," and I went, "That'll do." So here we are, and hopefully, my boss doesn't see this on YouTube before I finish the process. But I am in the final stage. They actually called the recruiter, said they wanted me for the contract to hire position, but I'm interested in direct hire. So I pushed back and said, "I'm glad that you want me. Prove it." So now I'm going to another interview. This time, hopefully, as a direct hire interview as opposed to a contract hire.
Yeah, we'll try to keep this video on the QT.
Thanks. The last interview I think is Monday, so hopefully it didn't be on the QT for long.
No, it sounds good. No, really happy for you. You're a really good success story for our school, and I think you've been really good with what you've done. Just really embracing the career and embracing becoming an engineer and a developer. And I think you found your calling. I really do.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, Tech Academy definitely pushed me to get there, so I owe a lot to you guys.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say too is you put yourself out there. You were at like a meetup, and that's how this opportunity presented itself. And that's what I try to tell graduates and people going into the industry. You want to put yourself in a position of opportunity. So you may have worked all day, and then there's this meetup tonight, but you're tired. You don't want to go. Sometimes you got to push yourself because it puts yourself in a position of opportunity where something like a job and the job of your dreams maybe, or just a job that's going to give you a lot better experience doing something you want to do, that opportunity could be there and you'll miss it. So really try whenever you can put yourself in a position of opportunity.
There's a quote about that. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I think that's Seneca. So yeah, he's absolutely right there. I mean, if you don't spend the time creating the opportunities for that lucky strike, you're not going to get the lucky strike. You got to buy the Powerball ticket to hit the Powerball, right?
So true. So true. Got to be in it to win it.
Dan, I see your message. Studying currently, haven't made any roads into a possible position yet. Just hey, it's exactly what we're talking about right here. So while you're studying, there's nothing against going on and beginning to network. Like junior development is so saturated. There are so many junior developers looking to get their first position. The only way you set yourself apart from the others is actually putting your face in front of people. So I would encourage you do the networking, get in there, shake some hands, put forth a little extra energy, and then go home and binge on pizza, and you'll feel better.
And don't be afraid to be honest. You can let them know, hey, I'm going to school for this. I'm learning this. I'm new to the industry. and they'll understand it. And so you don't have to go in there, trying to be something like a, mid-level engineer or something like that. Just be yourself and be honest.
That's the way to impress engineers who pretend that they know things are probably not the ones you want to hang out with.
This is true. Very true. All right. Anyone else with any questions? And anything else for you, Gab?
All right, so I learned a lot in here, and I guess I'm going to use that to justify why my GitHub has been dormant lately. I'm just not rushing to push right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So Matthew mentioned some things about networking, and one way to improve that network is to actually attend some of these events, like these tech talks. And we're doing these almost every week. We have another one scheduled next week and the week after that. So watch out for the emails there. And another thing that we can provide that can help you with your career is another service that we provide called the Accelerator. So as the name implies, it's meant to accelerate your career. So we discuss a lot of topics in there. We've discussed some debugging last week. The week before that, we were talking about automation. We're doing a lot of AI stuff. And the good thing is that for the graduates of the academy, you actually have access to 3 months of free accelerator classes. So there's a lot of educational videos in there and other reading materials that you can use. Ranges from a lot of topics, from C# development, automation, many other topics. So definitely take advantage of that. And do watch out for any announcements in our Meetup, Eventbrite, and Calligator groups, because there will be more events coming up. We're actually planning on hosting some alumni events. And on those alumni events, there will be people who have made it in the tech industry and people who are trying to break into the tech industry. So those are some things that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, great.
That's some really good. Yeah, that's some really good stuff. And that accelerator is really good for ongoing learning also. So we do recommend that. All right. Well, thank you, Matthew. That was a great talk and great to see you, and congratulations on how things are going for you. And we would definitely like to have you back at some point, and you can update us on how things are going, and that would be awesome. And yeah, we will have our Tech Talk next Friday, same time. And who's the speaker next week, Gab? Do you know?
It'll be Kevin.
Okay. That'll be a good one. And we will see you next week. So have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks again, Matthew. And we will see you later. Thanks all.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
All right.
Matthew.